Today, we're going to walk through the documented life, death, and really the enduring legacy of Rachel Corrie. She was a 23-year-old American activist whose story became this international focal point, and, it remains a subject of incredibly intense debate to this day.
To really understand Rachel Corrie's story, I think it helps to start with her own words. And get this quote is from a speech she gave on world hunger when she was just in the 5th grade. I mean, even at 10 years old, you can just feel that powerful sense of responsibility that would really come to define the rest of her life.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll start with her background as an activist. Then, we'll actually read from her own emails from Gaza. From there, we'll dive into the incident that led to her death, unpack the totally conflicting accounts that came out of it, and finally, explore her lasting and, very contested legacy.
All right, first up, an activist from Olympia. So how did a young woman from Washington State find herself in the middle of the Gaza Strip? Let's find out.
So who was Rachel Corrie? Well, by all accounts, she was a deeply committed peace activist from a pretty young age. While she was at the Evergreen State College, she got really involved with local peace groups. Eventually, she joined something called the International Solidarity Movement, or ISM, and as part of her senior year college project, she traveled to Gaza. Her goal? To try and start a sister city project between her hometown of Olympia and the city of Rafah.
Now, to get a much deeper understanding of her perspective, we can actually turn to her own words. What you're about to see comes from the email she sent back home to her family from Rafah in early 2003.
This quote, from one of her very first emails home, just radiates this sense of shock. You can really feel the huge gap she felt between, her academic understanding of the conflict and the brutal reality she was suddenly witnessing on the ground.
So you might be wondering, what exactly was this group she was with? Well, according to the sources, the International Solidarity Movement is a Palestinian-led organization. Now, while it does acknowledge what it sees as the Palestinian right to self-defense, the organization itself is committed to nonviolent, direct action. Their stated goal is to end the Israeli occupation.
In her emails, Rachel really painted a picture of the severe economic freefall in Rafah. Look at these numbers. She reported that the number of local workers who could get jobs in Israel had just plummeted from 60,000 down to only 600. The international airport's runways? Demolished. The trade border with Egypt? Blocked. And even access to the sea had been completely cut off. She also wrote a lot about the destruction of homes. And then there's this number, 602. That's the figure she cited from the Rafah Popular Refugee Committee for the number of homes that had been completely bulldozed since the start of the Second Intifada. Now, based on everything she was seeing, Rachel Corrie came to this incredibly powerful and, let's be honest, highly controversial conclusion in an email to her mother. It's really important to be clear here. These are her words. This was her perception. She felt that what she was witnessing amounted to what she called a genocide, and she felt a deep sense of personal and national complicity in it. But her emails weren't just about destruction. The very next day, she wrote this. She described an incredible resilience, a strength among the people she met. She pointed to their ability to just remain human, to laugh, to be generous, to have family life, all in the face of constant danger. The word she landed on was dignity.
And that brings us to the central event of her story, the incident that took place in Rafah on March 16, 2003.
So what happened that day is not a settled matter, not by a long shot. The facts are hugely contested, and there are two fundamentally different, conflicting narratives about how Rachel Corrie died.
Okay, so on one side, you have the account from her fellow International Solidarity Movement activists. They say that Corrie was wearing a bright, fluorescent orange jacket, that she was clearly visible, and that the bulldozer operator deliberately ran her over. Then, on the other side, you have the official account from the Israel Defense Forces, or IDF. They concluded her death was a tragic accident. They state that the bulldozer operator had a severely restricted field of view and simply did not see her. In their version, she was hidden by a mound of dirt and was hit by falling debris, not run over by the machine itself.
So these conflicting accounts kicked off a years-long search for accountability, which is what we're going to cover next, the investigations and the court rulings that followed.
The initial Israeli military investigation wrapped up in 2003. Its official ruling? Her death was a regrettable accident. It basically affirmed the account that the operator couldn't see her and that she was struck by debris moved by the bulldozer, not by the vehicle itself. But that was nowhere near the end of it. In 2005, the Corrie family took the step of filing a civil lawsuit in Israel. The trial didn't even begin for another 5 years. Then in 2012, an Israeli court ruled against the family, finding the military was not at fault. They appealed, but in 2015, the Supreme Court of Israel upheld that original verdict, and that really marked the end of a decade-long legal battle.
This was the core reasoning from the judge in that 2012 verdict. He said he found no negligence on the part of the driver. He ruled that her death was, in his words, an accident she brought upon herself by being in a closed military zone and not keeping a safe distance.
But, and this is a pretty big but, the U.S. government had a very different take. Right after that verdict, the American ambassador to Israel at the time, Dan Shapiro, publicly stated that the U.S. did not find the Israeli investigation satisfactory. He criticized it for not being, quote, thorough, credible, or transparent.
And it wasn't just the U.S. government. Major human rights organizations were also raising serious concerns. Both Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have been calling for a fully independent investigation from the get-go. They hit the military's probe for what they described as a lack of impartiality and professionalism, and pointed to what Human Rights Watch called a pattern of impunity for Israeli forces.
And that all brings us to our final section, a contested legacy. Because in the years since her death, Rachel Corrie has become this incredibly powerful symbol. But what exactly that symbol represents, well, that really depends on who you ask.
Her story has been memorialized in so many different ways. Her own writings were turned into a really acclaimed play, My Name is Rachel Corrie. A ship in the 2010 Gaza flotilla was named after her. You can find streets named in her honor in both Ramallah and, interestingly, Tehran. Her family started a foundation for peace and justice in her name, and her life has inspired documentaries, songs, even a cantata. It's a truly tangible, global legacy.
And that leaves us right here with this final question. The story of Rachel Corrie is a story of starkly different truths. It really depends on the evidence you trust and the perspective you hold, and it forces us to ask a tough question. When the facts themselves are at the very heart of the dispute, how is a person's story ultimately written? And whose version is the one that endures?